Googled my cult's name for the first time, which I thought was just the name of the church, and saw many articles about how the leader was charged for raping or sexually assaulting women. I showed my fellow cult members and they told me, the leader, said that all those articles are lying and that we shouldn't believe them. I reflected some more, and realized that weekday services at 4 a.m. and Sunday services that lasted 7 hours were absolutely not normal. What cult, if you don't mind me asking? It's called Providence and is based in South Korea. I also want to add, if any potential cult members are reading this, if a religious group says over and over that they are not a cult, chances are that they are a cult. There were so many weird things going on that I never noticed until I even considered the idea that I was in a cult. Are you planning to leave? I left several months ago. It was difficult as hell though, and I had to make it a very slow process because 2 people in particular kept harassing me, like showing up to my workplace or my neighborhood, calling me in the middle of the night, spamming me with hundreds of text messages even after I told them multiple times I did not want anything to do with their religious group. Couldn't call it a cult to their faces because they were in denial. I finally threatened to get a lawyer involved if they didn't stop contacting me. When my parents told me they would let me die if I needed a blood transfusion. When I was never allowed to play with any worldly kids at school. When I was not allowed to celebrate my birthday or any other holiday. In 1998 I was told to throw away Final Fantasy VII because I would become demonized. In 1995, my mom threw away my entire comic book collection. When my daughter was molested by another member of the cult and I was not allowed to call the police. When I was told I could not talk to my brother because he had sex before he was married. When I had oral sex for the first time in my life after being married for 15 years. Cult banned even if you were married. Finding out I had a cousin who was 25, my uncles left 40 years ago and we were not allowed to talk to them. I could think of some more. Jehovah's Witness? Yup. I was an elder when my wife and woke up. The Philly Inquirer is going to run our story April 1st. When I told my parents that I wanted to cut my hair for the first time at 16 and they made me sign a contract claiming all responsibility for any disease or other misfortune that God would rain upon me for it. What with speaking in tongues, people tithing to the point of not knowing how they would travel to work, the disbelief in birth control, even when married, and the fact that I wasn't allowed to have pierced ears, I identify with this. My mom trimmed my hair on occasion for split ends, but we didn't get haircuts either. I got my ears pierced when I was 18. Former Pentecostal. I remember when I trimmed my hair behind my parents' backs and it was still a good 4 foot 3 inches. My mom saw it and said, "That is so short. Just, so short." And yeah, the tithe expectation was insane. Fortunately my parents are doing fine now, but they recently told me that the only reason they're as well off as they are is because they tithed when they couldn't afford it. And I was thinking, oh, so when we couldn't afford something, it's because you were pissing the money away to a church? Cool. I was in a cult that was run by a family member. It was a small group, and we were to give 100% loyalty to this family member, financial, and everything. It escalated to be my whole life for a good 5 years and I didn't know what normal relationships were. I met a guy and he showed me what love actually is. He told me that this relationship I had with this family member wasn't loving and I immediately knew. Told him everything and was out since then. It was so hard to say, I think I might be in a cult, but I did. Blacklisted family member and other members and haven't looked back. When I was stationed on Okinawa, late 90s, I went to this church that seemed to be the pretty generic Christian church, but they met in a small room above a store. Didn't think much about it until they got a new pastor. They owned a house in town and always invited everyone over for some cookouts and Bible study. The new pastor was actively encouraging the enlisted service members to move into the house and get the housing allowance to support the house. Then he wanted to see our leave and earnings statement, think pay stubs, to ensure we were supporting the church enough. I think the final straw was when they started taking attendance for their 7 days. Yep, you were expected to attend some church things 7 days a week, of services and trying to shame anyone that didn't make it to something. I didn't tell them I wasn't going anymore, just stopped showing up. They knew where my barracks room was and sent soul savers to get me back to the church. The last time they talked to me, they again went with the shame route, that no other church would get me into heaven. And I told them I think they proved I made the right decision. How'd they have access to the base? Other service members? Yes, they had other military members who were in their church drive them on base. When the second guy took over, their soul saving became way over the top. They would go to all the barracks and knock on every single door to recruit new members. When I told them I didn't think that was allowed so wouldn't do it, The pastor said I had to decide whether the military cared about me or the church. I think abandoning their church was the best, and I know they weren't the only church doing things like this across multiple bases. When I got kicked out and I almost tried to kill myself. Couldn't see myself without the cult. Are you doing okay now? Yeah, it's been 2 years, but it was rough. Those sort of communities really take away your sense of self. If you're not in the group, you're not worthy. When the leader wanted to split up all the marriages and take the wives for himself, and when he wanted to give the husbands of those wives different women to be with. Basically sharing the women, except nobody had a say in who they were to be with. Many people were deeply unhappy and pained by this, but they had to submit to the Holy Spirit, as they would say, and do what they were told. I was a teen at the time my family and I left this cult, so thankfully I was not pawned off on some random guy. What cult was this? A relatively small, unknown one in Alberta, Canada. They mainly refer to themselves as the group. I've talked about this before on Reddit, and was surprised because so many people also went to these schools but had no idea. The Siju boarding schools were founded by a high-ranking Synanon member named Mel Wasserman. If you guys don't know what Synanon is, here you go. There's about a dozen of these schools and they are still open. They kept all the teachings, but dumbed them down for kids. Every few months we would go through a workshop, called Prophets, where they would do weird ass fucking things like make one person sit on a mattress in the middle of the room and have the rest of us pretend like it was a life raft, and you have to scream out all of the reasons you have to live and beg for your life. Staff would walk around, going, you live, you die, pretty much all down to favoritism. If you get picked, you get on the life raft, if you don't, you drown, which was a little touchy for me because my older brother had just died from drowning less than 3 years earlier, but I had to act it out regardless, otherwise I would fail the prophet and I would be pushed back, and then I would be there another 3 months until the next one rolls around. Also, sleep deprivation was a key part. The last workshop was 7 days, and the whole time you have to refer to yourself as me. I don't know how to explain this, but pretty much if you told a staff that you didn't want to do something they'd be like, that's right, I doesn't want to do this, but your me does. This was right before they dropped you off at a mall. Keep in mind, we were all kids who were in the middle of nowhere in Idaho, who have been away from the world for almost 3 years, and you had to 1. Buy someone food, 2. Get someone's address, 3. Talk to someone of the opposite sex, and some other shit, but you couldn't tell other people why you were doing it. Think about that next time you're in a mall, if anyone even goes to malls anymore. You would have approach random strangers and do that, after being shut away for almost 3 years. When you graduate that prophet, summit, the whole school, about 60 kids at once time, gathers round the main room in the house. They play this fucking song, The Rose, by Bette Midler, and the kids walk one by one with a rose, and walk through the crowd and touch their hands and cry and Jesus Christ, what the fuck lol. Just clicking on that song to link it made my heart start beating and really took me back. I can go on and on and on. I was there for 2 years and this doesn't even scratch the surface of all of the weird shit. When did I find out? Like 10 years later when I really started thinking about it. It all felt totally normal, and I just remembered friends and stuff. That's the scary part. This was not normal, and to all the Siju kids in here, sorry, you were in a cult. Just really take a minute to think about it. All of the weird sayings, the agreements, the smoosh piles, the bands, the raps, the jumpsuits, the repetitive music, the scrolls, the workshops, the monitored phone calls, the mandatory positivity letters, the outlets, the peace talks, the inner circles, all of it, and this was all Synanon. That's not even including the prophets, my dudes. I still have my prophet journal around here somewhere, let me update this in a bit. Edit, here's the school's wiki. I went to Boulder Creek Academy, 2001 to 2003. I grew up in it. I kind of always knew. There wasn't an oh shit moment, it was more like an I've had enough of this moment. For me it was when one of my elders told me I should try to figure out why God was punishing me by giving me cancer. Fuck you Kevin, for your sake, let hope we never cross paths again. Holy shit, both of us born and raised in a cult and had cancer. Didn't think I would meet another. How's life been since then? Sorry to hear what you went through with their shitty empathy and lack of support, stranger. I hope you don't see Kevin again either. I'm doing well. Leaving was difficult because it alienated me from some of my friends and family. But since I was going through chemo and surgeries and the whole cancer thing at the same time, a lot of those friends and family turned out to be fair weather friends and family anyway. Indiana was able to shed my old life and just start out fresh. Hardest part was coming back from the cancer. I've got a pretty good handle on it now and I'm doing well and happier now than I've ever been. This will get buried but whatever. I grew up fundamentalist evangelical Christian. My dad saw the Duggars on TV and decided we were gonna be like them. Long skirts, modest clothes, courtships, all of it. My mom had gone through early menopause due to cancer treatment, but that was merely a small roadblock. I went to church every damn day. I was not allowed to question the doctrine. I was not allowed to study for the SATs because my mission in life, per God, was to get married and have babies. I was responsible for the impure thoughts my male counterparts had. It was my job to dress in such a manner that they weren't tempted. I was told that women shouldn't have a voice in their reproductive care, because that's what God is for. So no sex until marriage, no birth control. Also, women who had sex before the holy bonds of wedlock were compared to used Scotch tape. I'm out now. I had sex before marriage. My dad refers to my daughter as a bastard. We don't speak. I'm tapping this out wearing a tank top and shorts. I hated my life in that cult. I love it now. I was raised in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which isn't a cult per se, but there's some strong cultish tendencies. There was a lot of stuff. I'll see if I can list it. I had a hard time with discerning fact from fiction for a while when I was a kid because I was surrounded by adults who claimed to literally hear the voice of God speak to them when they prayed, or attributed stuff like finding the keys you lost earlier that day in a location you definitely would have left them to the direct intervention of God in worldly affairs. That is, God is real, He's here on earth, He talks to me and helps me find shit I misplaced. I participated in a baptism for the dead, where I was baptized in place of someone who died a while ago, whose name had been submitted to the temple by a family member, probably, where I changed into a white jumpsuit and was dunked under the water by an elder in my faith in a tub of lukewarm water held elevated from the ground by 12 life-size gold-painted oxen statues. It was cool though because afterwards we went go-karting. I lost all the races, but it was still fun. I was told the end of days was right around the corner, and I needed to prep some food and stuff for when Jesus came, because before Jesus came the geopolitical situation had been prophesied to make it difficult to get food. So my mom had a bunch of instant potatoes in the basement for when Jesus came back. The shooting of a child predator, emotional abuser, arsonist, murderer, self-styled militia leader was pitched to me as a tragic martyrdom. Good times. I've got some dank casserole recipes in the quiver for when winter rolls around again, and some of that God is with you and will help you succeed delusion helped me start a pattern of academic success, which put me in a pretty decent career. The Mormon cult. I realized Mormons treat people who leave like absolute shit, and families are torn apart because a family member stops believing. Mormons' kids are pretty much forced to join the church at 8, and go on a mission at 18, if they're male. You also have to pay 10% of all income before taxes to the church in order to get in the temple. There's also sexual repression, teaching false history, and any information that doesn't come directly from the church is labeled anti-Mormon. Congratulations on getting out. Thanks. It's been a hard journey but completely worth it. There really wasn't one concrete oh shit moment, but the first time I remember thinking this is BS was how often people would be sentenced to hell for the most trivial reasons. Everything from an impure thought to cursing to sleeping in late. So one day I was discussing future marriage with my mother as all 11-year-olds in the sect do, and the topic of what I would do if my husband potentially abused me came up, having witnessed frequent mistreatment and power play relationships by that point. Me, then divorce is okay, right? Her, no, divorce is never okay. Me, but what about if he beat me really bad and I was hurt with bruises? Her, it's still not okay. Me, well, then what do I do? Her, you pray for him and ask the Lord to help him see the error of his ways. The Lord can always work, and it's blasphemy to try to interfere with his plans by divorcing. That's when I remember thinking, bullshit. Edit, this is Quiverful and Institute in Basic Life Principles a la the Duggars. I think it took about 8 months after I was excommunicated for getting raped and then not going through with the forced marriage to fix everything. I was born into it, so the controlling rules, the families being torn apart because someone left or wouldn't join, the discouragement of women doing anything but being housewives, church 20 hours a week, were just my life and seemed completely normal. They kicked me out for a year and, during that time, I started to see things differently. I began to see the world in shades of gray instead of the usual black and white. With the help of therapy and some honest, supportive friends, non-members, obviously, as I never saw my cult friends or family again, I realized, hey, that was actually really messed up. I think I was in a cult. Another member of the cult raped you, and then you were supposed to marry your rapist? Am I understanding this correctly? He was a non-member when it happened. I was so freaked out that I would go to hell and that the cult would find out and excommunicate me. So I stayed with him in a secret relationship as I didn't know how else to fix the situation. During that time, he was very abusive. He eventually joined my cult, no pressure from me, and the radicalization made him even worse. Because he was now a member, we became an official couple. Cult found out about the grape, excommunicated me, I got the harsher sentence of the two of us, and forced us to marry. The cult leaders were aware of the abuse. I backed out of it when he stabbed himself because I went to my brother's birthday family dinner instead of spending time with him. That was a decade ago now, but the cult still hopes I will come back one day and marry him. If you were not afraid of hell, would you have reported the grape when it happened? In all honesty, probably not, because I still had a fear of the cult finding out and me getting excommunicated, and therefore losing my family. Plus I had debilitating social anxiety disorder at the time and was very young. If I was the person I am today, more life experience, atheist, lots more confidence, etc., things would have been a lot different. My aunt, uncle and their 5 kids were in a cult in the 80s/90s. They were faith healers and the leader basically preached that if you got sick it's because you didn't love God enough. Their oh shit moment was when the cult leader died of gangrene. They immediately founded their own church after the cult disbanded though, so they definitely still have some weird beliefs. To be fair, this leader was also due to face trial the next week for accessory to manslaughter for several church members who died because of his teachings. It's estimated that at least 90 people died, many mothers and babies during childbirth, so there is a thought that things were closing in around him as well. Source: I grew up in this church, was born at home along with my 7 siblings, and didn't go to a doctor until I was 12. It was whooping cough, right? You mean how the leader died or the mothers? The leader died because he was a diabetic and got a gangrenous ulcer on his leg, which he refused to receive any treatment for, to the extent that he stopped even letting his wife clean it or redress it. Which is why lots of people think he kind of just gave up on life and wanted out, but perhaps he really did believe he was being tested and needed to push through in faith or something. I know that for many months afterward, his wife still believed that God would raise him from the dead, and that he would show up one day out of the blue. So every morning, she laid out one of his suits on the bed, since he was going to walk in at any moment and would need his suit before he headed off to the church to keep preaching. Really sad, honestly. In terms of the deaths of mothers and infants, the church culture dictated that you have lots of children, and there weren't doctors, nor much sexual education to understand birth control, etc. For instance, between my family and 2 different aunts and uncles that were all in the same church, each family had between 8 to 11 children. Some families had 15 or so kids. With that many births happening, and no medical assistance or interventions if things go poorly, you're statistically going to have a fairly high number of deaths of either the baby, mother or both in some cases. There was one lady who was an unregistered midwife who helped deliver untold hundreds of kids, and was present at the birth of all of my siblings, including the one who died. Add to that, the lack of medical care for the first few years of life meant that any baby or child who was sick was simply prayed over, often not given basic treatment even. Many deaths came from that as well. I have friends who didn't get glasses until their families left the church when they were teens, or when they moved out in their later teens, who literally didn't know what their parents or siblings looked like because they had such poor vision. That kind of thing was very normal, pretending everything was just fine when something was actually wrong because of the social stigma of not having enough faith for the thing to be healed. And people would tell more and more wild stories about crazy miraculous healings because it earned them social capital in the church and made them look better. There was heaps of physical and sexual abuse as well throughout the church. I could go on and on. I thought I had read something about whooping cough going around and killing a lot of children, but that may have been another church, not sure. Thank you for the informative post. The only things I know about Faith Assembly come from Wikipedia and the little information that my dad remembers from that time. I'm glad you were able to get out and I hope you're doing alright these days. If you don't mind me asking, why or when did your family leave? That could be the case, but I'm not familiar with it. I was quite young at the time. My family left when the church broke up in the early 90s, and joined one of the churches that came out of it. That was quite a bit better, as doctors were generally allowed, etc., but still in the general ethos of Faith Assembly. My parents only left that offshoot a few years ago, for a far more modern church. A friend of mine is a director/filmmaker who is currently working on a documentary about it all, and we've been trying to piece together the whole story. I'm also a mod of the Children of Faith Assembly page on Facebook that has several hundred members, but we like to keep it to people who are actually part of the church or close to it. There's a recent episode of Stuff You Should Know that does a little bit on Faith Assembly and Hobart Freeman as well, if you're interested.